Welcome back, everyone. I am Dylan. This is All You Can Board, and believe it or not, we are back with another Marvel Champions review because I have just got War Machine. It seems like I just got Mad Titan Shadow, but again, because of the delay, we're getting some of these releases smushed together, so I'm not complaining. I have new content, and I am super pumped because, spoiler alert, War Machine may just be my favorite new hero pack released in 2021. It's very, very close between War Machine and Quicksilver to me. I absolutely love this hero and the way it plays. I'll talk more about overall the hero at the end, but we're going to jump right into the cards and you're going to start to get a feel of why I love this hero pack so much. So we're going to kick things off, of course, with the hero card itself and on the alter ego form, which is James Rhodes. So it has a standard recovery of 3, hand size of 6, hit points 10. Action here is choose a War Machine card in your discard pile and shuffle it into your deck. Now, obviously, this means every time you're in alter ego form, you don't have to exhaust James Rhodes to do that. So you're going to be taking a very valuable card, one of the War Machine cards, in your discard pile and shuffling it in. Obviously, that's very good. You're going to get some cards back that some of your big attack cards, some of your big hitter cards that you need to finish off the scenario potentially. You're going to shuffle back into your deck. If your deck is thin, you're going to get to a little bit quicker. The added bonus on this that I've enjoyed in my playthroughs is that when you mulligan at the start of the game, say you end up with a hand where you have some of his kit that you know you're going to want to play, but you also drew into one of his other powerful attack cards like Full Auto and different things we're going to get into, or an ally that you would have loved to have played but you can't justify or find a way to also play on the first turn. I guess the only ally would be Iron Man because it's a War Machine card. But regardless, you can basically on the very first turn of the game before you flip into hero form, you can take one of those War Machine cards and put it back into your deck so that you don't feel like, hey, I'm not going to see that card for the entire length of my entire deck just because I happened to draw it in my opening hand and it just wasn't a card I wanted to play right now, or there was no threat on the main scheme, or there was nothing I wanted to do a major attack on. Whatever the case may be, you can get that card back. Hopefully it comes up later when it's in a more valuable position for you. Just an added bonus, something I was doing every time I played with them. The forced response here is after you change to this form, discard each ammo counter from your identity. Ammo counters are the unique play style of War Machine. You're going to be getting them onto War Machine every time you're in hero form. Basically, this just means that when you flip to alter ego, you're losing all your counters. You're going to have to start back at 0, so you want to try to expend them all, if possible, before you flip to alter ego. So that's pretty much all there is to say about the alter ego form. Let's jump to the hero side, which is, of course, War Machine. Pretty decent stat line of only 1 thwart, but 2 attack and 2 defense. The attack especially I've really enjoyed because, so much of what War Machine is doing is just dealing damage. So having guaranteed extra 2 damage that you're dealing every turn just with your base attack is very good. His ability here is locked and loaded. The response is after you change to this form, place 5 ammo counters on War Machine. So everything War Machine is doing, or at least a lot of what War Machine is doing in his pack of cards, is involving ammo counters. Now, at the start of the game, you're going to have no way to use these ammo counters. So the first time you flip to hero form, you may think, what is this hero doing? I am not doing anything with these ammo counters. You need to obviously build up his kit to properly take advantage of them. You can look at this in a similar way to Iron Man, starting off with a small hand size and you really having to build him up. But once he's built up, he feels overpowered, very powerful. War Machine has a similar thing going on here. Instead of the hand size, you're really going to feel like these ammo counters aren't being utilized and you're having to find a way to really do anything with them for potentially a few turns. But as long as you've drawn into some of those in your opening hand or you've mulliganed for them, you're going to quickly find that you're doing things that are very beneficial with War Machine. So that's pretty much all there is to say about the hero card. We're going to talk more about the ammo counters as we get into cards that involve them. But needless to say, you're always going to have base 5 when you flip over, but there are ways to have much more than 5 if you plan accordingly. So let's jump into the signature ally, which is Iron Man. So Iron Man Tony Stark version, 3 cost, 3 health, 2 thwart, 2 attack, consequential damage on each. The response is after Iron Man enters play, search your deck and discard pile for a tech upgrade and add it to your hand, shuffle your deck. The reason this is so good is because Again, we talked about wanting to build your kit with War Machine. So if you happened in the early game to not be drawing to the cards you needed, or they got discarded somehow, you know, it ended up as a drone minion with playing against Ultron, and it got discarded, and you really wanted to you know, get one of those kit cards to strengthen your War Machine play, you can use Iron Man to basically grab that specific card out of your discard pile, out of your deck, add it to your hand, and you know you're either going to play it this turn or next turn, so you're guaranteeing yourself a piece of that kit. That's very crucial for heroes that specifically rely heavily on their kit. War Machine is one of those heroes. So again, if you happen to have had an opening hand that didn't have any ways to utilize ammo counters, that may be one of the first plays you're doing if you have this in your opening hand, so that you're guaranteeing some way to start using those counters. So great for the cost, great stat line, decent health, and with that benefit, I really love this card. It was just a fallback option to me to grab the tech cards, even if I wasn't using it every time it was in my hand. There was times where I could not have been happier to have this card in my hand. So a really, really good signature ally. It really helps out what you're doing with War Machine. Next up, we have Munitions Bunker, which is a really important support card. This is a 2-cost support. Alter Ego action is you exhaust Munitions Bunker and place 2 ammo counters on the bunker, not War Machine. And then the hero action is exhaust Munitions Bunker, move every ammo counter here to War Machine. So this is a phenomenal card in this pack. I loved using this card. So the way I often was using it was that I was always saving up more than just 2 ammo counters. So in my case, when I was playing solo, I found that I was keeping things under control with the other kit cards I had already put into play, with the 5 ammo counters that I already was getting on War Machine. And I was basically every Alter Ego flip, which I was flipping pretty regularly with War Machine, I was placing 2 ammo counters onto Munitions Bunker, and then after everything readied, before I flipped him out of Alter Ego form, I was putting another 2 counters on it, which means I couldn't get those counters this turn, but now I had 4 counters sitting there. I eventually had one game where I got 8 counters on Munitions Bunker before I ever actually took them off. And once I did add those 8, again, imagine if you already have 5 on War Machine, you have 13 counters now, which is 13 ammo on War Machine. And as we'll see with some of the cards coming up, that could easily mean straight up 13 damage. That could mean a whole lot more than 13 damage. So it's really, really important to make sure that you're building up your ammunition or your munitions bunker as much as possible, and only really using it when you have to tap into it. If you find that on your turn you can accomplish everything you need to without using the ammo, it makes no sense to dump that ammo into War Machine and do something that's okay with it and potentially have to lose some ammo if you flip to Alter Ego. It's better just to save it and unload it on a turn where you know you're going to take the maximum value. And sometimes you're going to have, I've had turns with War Machine that are some of the most damage I've ever done in a single turn, just because of when I timed my Munitions Bunker dump onto War Machine. So I love this card. It's super important. Get it out as early as you can. If that ends up in your opening hand, I don't know how many other cards there are in this deck that you want to necessarily play over Munitions Bunker. You're going to use that ammo a lot. You're going to be happy that's in play. If it happens to be at the bottom of your deck, it's super unlucky because, it's just such a great support card. I love it. Next up, we have Upgraded Chassis. This is a 3-cost upgrade. War Machine gains the aerial trait, does not have the aerial trait to start off with. And the hero response here is, after you change to hero form, exhaust this to give War Machine a tough status card. This is phenomenal. The problem is it is expensive, and early on, because there are so many pieces, like War Machine has so many good tech upgrades, like so many great ones you want to try to play, that really the downside of this card is that it's, for how expensive it is, even though it seems like, it's only 3, there's so many other things that you're going to want to play that early on, if you get this in your hand, I found that I just always chose another part of his tech upgrades to put into play rather than this, and it ended up in my discard pile. However, when I drew this later on, when I had already built up my kit and I could justify playing this, it was amazing. Every single time you're flipping to hero form, you're getting a tough status card. That's an entire hit you're able to take from the villain without obviously taking any damage. In a solo game, super beneficial to have that, to know every single time you flip to hero form, you're going to basically be able to take in a single hit and not have it do anything to you, because it allows you to stay in hero form longer, utilize your ammo counters over a longer period of time. It's a great card. It's just a little bit pricey based on how much you're trying to get done with War Machine in terms of building up his kit. That's probably the issue you're going to run into. It's the one that I ran into, but yeah, if you can, absolutely play it. Next up, we have 2 copies of Gauntlet Gun. super vital card. I'm going to explain why. We obviously see this across many heroes where you have other ways to generate resources. This is the same thing. 2-cost upgrade, resource exhaust it, generate a wild resource for a War Machine event, and place 1 ammo counter on War Machine. So it is specifically tied to War Machine events, but it also places a ammo counter on War Machine. So the reason this is really important is because a lot of the events you're going to be playing with War Machine cost ammo counters. So this card is essentially not only helping you pay for that card, it's also paying for the ammo requirement, which is going to allow you to do more in your turn because now you have more ammo to spend. So really, really important card. Yes, it's generated a resource that is limited to just event cards, but that being said, once your kit is entirely built up, and if you get both these out, you're going to already have a pretty solid kit, most likely. That's most of what you're going to be spending it on is your event cards. And again, adding the ammo cannot be overstated how important that is, based on the fact that the more ammo you have, eventually the more damage you're going to be doing. Again, the games that I got both of these out, I was able to do so much with War Machine because there was times where I wanted to use, do a bunch of different things based on my hand. I just didn't have the resources to do it. So if I only had a 5-card hand size, for instance. Now with those in play, I'm able to do multiple of my event cards in a turn. I'm able to spend a whole bunch of ammo counters in a turn and just really go off. And those make for some of the most exciting War Machine turns you're going to have. So next up, we have Missile Launcher. This is a 1-cost tech upgrade. Hero action, attack, exhaust Missile Launcher, and remove 1 ammo counter from War Machine. Deal 2 damage to an enemy. This attack gains ranged. This is an okay card. The range is, it's going to be a better card if the ranged is something that, something you really need. If you really need to avoid retaliates based on the villain you're fighting against or the minions that are coming into play, obviously you're going to rely a little more heavily on this. There's a card we're going to get to next called Shoulder Cannon that I just enjoyed way more than this card. And if you use them in tandem, it's giving you an extra damage. But really, if you're not getting the ranged benefit, I just found that I was always trying to justify, why would I play this card when I'm going to get more mileage out of Shoulder Cannon in the long run, and I could use this as a resource to fund something else of this kit that I was trying to play. So that's the issue I ran into with Missile Launcher. It's probably the least exciting card out of his War Machine cards for me personally, but again, still beneficial. It's still a guaranteed 2 damage from a single ammo counter that you're obviously always going to have on War Machine when you flip to hero form. But again, without the range, it's not something that I think you're going to be using all too often because it doesn't have a way to ready itself. That being said, let's talk about Shoulder Cannon, which will explain my thoughts a little bit better. So Shoulder Cannon is a 2-cost upgrade, and the hero action is also an attack, but it says exhaust Shoulder Cannon to deal only a single damage to an enemy. However, you may remove 1 ammo counter from War Machine to ready Shoulder Cannon. So it doesn't cost an ammo counter to do that initial damage, and then you pay a single ammo counter to ready it, and you can do it again, and you can continue to do that, which means that, again, in those situations, you say you have 10 ammo counters on War Machine, this is essentially as much damage up to 10 as you want to deal, because you're just readying it constantly. So it's a great way to expend the extra ammo counters you have. It's a great way to ping off tough status cards, to ping off Ultron bots, to spread your damage across a whole bunch of minions. The Shoulder Cannon, the value goes so far that really the only downside to this card is that there's only 1 in the deck, which means that you might not always run into it as often as you need or as early as you want. The games when I got this out early, this basically dictated a lot of the game for me and how I played, because I would always be able to maximize my ammo counters now. I would never have a waste, because at the very least I ping off a single damage here or there at the end. I was able to spread out the damage. I was able to control the board very easily because of that. And I just had this potential now where I could say, hey, anytime I am able to unload Munitions Bunker and have a whole bunch of counters, those counters basically exactly equal. Even if I didn't have any event cards to do more damage, that's how much damage I can do, which can end up being a whole lot. So Shoulder Cannon's great. If you get this in your opening hand, I don't see a situation that you don't play it. It's, again, one of those guaranteed cards I think you just want to play. And if you get it out early, I just think it's going to, really dictate the game for you and have the game actually go way more positively than a game where you didn't have Shoulder Cannon. So I've absolutely loved that card. It may be my favorite card in the War Machine hero cards, but there's so many that I love, it's hard for me to say. But regardless, it's just a really, really great card. Next up, we have 2 copies of Repulsor Beam. So this is an event card. So we obviously are going to get to the event cards now that you might be, using your ammo counters for, or spending for. I'm forgetting the name of the card. I forget names of the cards all the time. Gauntlet Gun. You might be using with Gauntlet Gun to help pay for it. So for instance, a Gauntlet Gun can completely pay for a Repulsor Beam here because it also provides the ammo counter, which is really, really good. So the hero action here is remove 1 ammo counter from War Machine to deal 4 damage. So this is obviously a much improved shoulder cannon, much improved missile launcher. It's a 1 resource card to deal 4 damage at the cost of a single ammo counter, which again, if you're just trying to find ways to play things from your hand and use all the ammo counters you can, you're obviously going to want to play every Repulsor Beam you draw, especially if it doesn't have to be paid for or used as a resource for something else. If you have Gauntlet Guns in play, they end up almost becoming Repulsor Blast or Repulsor Beam, payment cards now whenever you have them in your hand, because again, it gives you the ammo counter, it gives you the resource, it by itself does 4 damage now every single time you have these in your hand. So very, very cool card. There are 2 copies of them. You're going to see them a lot, and for me, what I use them for is on the big huge turns where I'm trying to do multiple things. I'm going to do 4 damage with one of my ammo counters because of Repulsor Beam, and then say I have 6 ammo counters left, I'm going to do 6 damage across those because of shoulder cannon. That's now 10 damage that I've used, and I've only really spent 1 resource to do that, and obviously all my ammo counters. And there might have been other things I was going to do with my hand. I may have had another card we're going to look at that does a whole bunch of damage based on removing 4 ammo counters. So it really does quickly add up, and there's a whole lot you can do based on how many ammo counters you have and how many resources you can generate. Next up, we have 2 copies of Targeted Strike. This is a 1-cost hero action. Thwart, remove 1 ammo counter from War Machine, remove 3 threat from a scheme. So this is your only real way in the base cards to deal with threat at all. So especially if you're going to be playing solo with War Machine and you are in a scenario or situation where you do have to be more cognizant of threat and finding ways to remove it, Targeted Strike is going to be one of your go-to cards that you are going to try not to have to discard or use, and you're going to, whenever they come up, try to mitigate whatever threat has been added on so that you can keep doing what you want to do with War Machine. So it's good value. 1 cost, remove 3 threat. It's not a whole lot of removal, but it's enough potentially, especially if you're playing solo, just to manage the board a little bit, and you're only losing 1 ammo counter for that. So there's 2 copies of it. Not much more to say, but it is your only go-to for threat removal, so keep that in mind before you too quickly discard it or use it for something else. If you discard them both early, you're going to have to make it through your whole deck before you potentially find a way to effectively deal with threat, because again, a War Machine can only remove 1 base with his basic stats, so keep that in mind. Next up, we have 2 copies of Scorched Earth. This is a massive AoE attack. So this is a 3-cost event. Remove 3 ammo counters from War Machine to deal 3 damage to every enemy in play. So this is the fully wipe out all the drones card in Ultron if you ever end up in a bad situation. I've done that in my playtest with them. I waited specifically because I knew I had this in my hand 1 extra turn and took a couple extra damage from drones because I thought there may have been more coming out. Sure enough, I ended up having the side scheme that comes into play that says when revealed, add 2 drones into play. So I ended up with 4 drones in play, and Scorched Earth on the next turn was able to remove everything, and because I had ways to generate resources, I was able to basically do a whole bunch more to Ultron directly, but I cleared the board just because of Scorched Earth. And you deal 3 damage to the villain on top of that. So really great card. You actually do get 2 copies of that of it, which is really, really great. And I think that anytime you're in a scenario where there are multiple minions coming out, you're basically going to rely on Scorched Earth as your way to clear the board and get things back under control. And it's super, super effective at that. It feels great when you have a situation that seems unmanageable to just say, I'm basically going to manage this with this 1 card. Yes, it costs 3, but again, if you set up your kit, if you have ways to generate resources, maybe you have 2 Gauntlet Guns in play, suddenly that costs practically nothing and is giving you ammo for it as well. So phenomenal card. And the last card we're going to look at for the hero cards is Full Auto, which is the huge single target attack. So this is a 2-cost event that says remove 4 ammo counters from War Machine to choose an enemy, deal 8 damage to that enemy that this attack gains overkill. So it's a 2-cost card to do 8 damage, which is obviously phenomenal. You do have to remove 4 ammo counters, which we can roughly say that a single ammo counter is worth around 2 damage, because I mean, it varies. I mean, you have Repulsor Beam that one is cost dealing 4 damage. You have you know, a missile launcher where it's dealing 2 damage. You have shoulder cannon where it's dealing 1 damage. So it's hard to say this is what an ammo counter is worth. But that being said, you're removing 4 because you're doing 8 damage to a target for very cheap. So that's sort of the trade-off. Now, the best time to use full auto is when you have access to a lot of resources. So maybe you have a 6-card hand size, maybe you have both Gauntlet Guns in play, maybe you have Quinn Carrier or something else in play to generate more resources. And say you basically have 6 cards in your hand and 3 resources you can generate on the board. This has happened to me a few times playing War Machine. You can now spend 2 of those resources, potentially both Gauntlet Guns, because this is an event, to basically pay for the entire cost of full auto, pay for 2 of the ammo counters on full auto, remove 2 extra from War Machine to now do 8 damage. Then if you have shoulder cannon in play, you can unload all your ammo counters, do a whole bunch more. Or perhaps you also have repulsor beams in play, so you can do 4 damage for a few. Like, you can very quickly have turns where you're dealing like upwards of 20 damage just from having timed your munitions bunker dump appropriately and having the right cards in your hand. That's obviously not going to happen all the time, but if you're someone who plays Marvel Champion and loves those huge burst turns, and I am someone who absolutely loves playing that way, War Machine is going to feel so great to play because you're basically working up to those huge turns. A lot of it feels like you're managing the board, doing bits of damage as you can until he is fully built, and then you just are doing massive turn after massive turn, especially if you're able to get those cards back using your action ability on your alter ego form. So phenomenal comboing. They all works in conjunction. Everything about playing War Machine's hero cards feels so good because they work so well in tandem with these ammo counters, with Munitions Bunker, with you know, refilling up to the base of 5 and trying to plan when you're going to dump your counters to have more. It's just, I love the play style, and it is so effective and it feels so great, and it's really strong. So those are all the hero cards. Let's jump into the leadership cards, which I find it very interesting that this ended up being leadership. Not because I don't think the character is a leader, but more so because based on the playstyle and how he plays, I would have almost for sure expected aggression. And I actually forgot he was a leadership ally until I looked in the pack and I said, oh yeah, right, of course. Because it just feels like an aggression hero, and it's one that like is going to slot in very nice as an aggression hero if you choose to play him that way because of how much damage he's dealing. But anyways, needless to say, we have a whole bunch of new leadership cards, so we're going to dive into them, and we have 2 brand new allies to talk about first. Both very big ones, exciting ones. The first one is Black Panther T'Challa. This is a 4-cost ally, so an expensive one with 4 health, 2 thwart, 2 attack, but 2 consequential damage on each of those. You may play the event attached to Black Panther as if it were in your hand, and that is because the response is after Black Panther enters play, you choose a leadership, which is a blue card, event in your discard pile, and attach it to Black Panther face down. That card can now stay on Black Panther as long as he is in play, and you can play it off Black Panther as if it were in your hand. So relatively an okay card. It really depends on the leadership synergy you have in your deck based on the cards that are there. And if you have cheaper ways to play back Black Panther, if you're able to reduce the cost of it somehow, really that's where you're getting most of your value. With 2 consequential damage on the attack and the thwart, you're only the max amount of attacks you can do without healing him or adding health, whatever the case may be, is 4 damage for 4 resources, which is not good value at all. You can do 2 damage for 4 resources and then block a hit, which starts to feel better. But overall, he's not like, it's not a crazy amount of stats for what you're paying for him. So it's going to feel a little bit weak on that side. You really have to have utilized the grabbing the leadership event out of the discard pile, which, as we'll see, there are some new leadership events that have really introduced a new way to play allies, where I think Black Panther fits in a little bit better. If you're playing him in any of the existing decks you have with the existing play styles, I don't know if he's going to slot in as effectively unless you really build him around the fact that you need to get your combo pieces back from the discard pile and have another turn to play them, and that's worth it to you. Otherwise, in just playing out of this base deck, I didn't get a whole ton of value out of Black Panther, but I still find it to be an interesting card, and there is going to be that time where you just have the perfect event that you want, or the perfect leadership event that you want, and you're going to be able to play it again, even instead of having to wait for it to come up in your deck again. So that being said, the next ally I was way more on board with, and that is Captain Marvel, but I do have a caveat here. So Captain Marvel is a 5-cost event. Super expensive. That's pretty much your entire hand unless you have ways to generate resources. 2 thwart, 3 attack, 2 consequential damage on the attack only, 4 health. She does have Aerial and she is an Avenger. The response is, after Captain Marvel enters play, discard the top 4 cards of your deck, and if you discard a printed energy resource, deal 3 damage to an enemy. If you discard more than 1, also stun that enemy. So I love Captain Marvel, the ally, but I specifically love her if you're not paying her for the full cost. I think for full cost, it's only something you want to do if you ended up with an entirely awful hand of 5 other bad cards that are just like aren't going to help you in this current situation, or just have no use whatsoever. That yes, you can use your whole hand and have an entire turn where all you do is play Captain Marvel. Sure, it's not going to feel great, but you can do it. Captain Marvel, when we start to get into the other new cards that are featured here, specifically we have Sneak Attack and we have Command Team coming up, and Save the Day. This new style of playing allies is where Captain Marvel slots into. So it's hard for me to talk about Captain Marvel here that much, but as we get into these other cards, I'm going to refer back to Captain Marvel and talk about some of my experiences and why I fell in love with this ally, because it has worked out so great for me, but again, only when I haven't been playing her for full cost. So I think you're going to want to find ways to discount her cost or use these new play styles we're going to see to be able to play her that way. So I am really on board with Captain Marvel, but let's talk about some of these new cards and then you'll start to see why. So first up, we have Command Team. So Command Team is a 2-cost support that has 3 uses because it has 3 command counters on it to start. The action is you exhaust Command Team and remove 1 command counter from it, ready an ally. I actually found this card to be super powerful in this new play style of allies. So basically, what we're going to get into is with Sneak Attack. I'll talk about Sneak Attack. It's hard to talk about these cards by themselves because so much of them is about the comboing I found. But we're going to be talking about Sneak Attack right away. Sneak Attack is a way that you're going to be playing an ally into play for very cheap compared to its original cost. However, it's basically gaining the a worse version of the Nick Fury trait, where at the end of the phase, not even the full turn, the phase you're currently on, that card is going to be discarded if it's still in play. So it's a temporary ally coming into play, and then it's gone. So yes, it's a way to play expensive allies like Captain Marvel, but you're only getting 1 use out of them. So coming back to Command Team, and the reason I got so much use out of Command Team, really liked it, was that Command Team basically allowed him to get the full use out of Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel would not cost 5 because I would use Sneak Attack, which I'll talk about right away. She would come into play. I'd attack with her for 3. She would take 2 consequential damage. I would use Command Team. She would ready. I'd attack with her for 3 again. She would die, but she was going to die anyways without blocking because of Sneak Attack. So I did 6 damage with Captain Marvel. I triggered her ability when she came into play, which was another 3 damage. That's 9 damage, and she's stunned. That ended up being phenomenal. It felt so good, and it's I think the way that Captain Marvel is more so meant to be played, and why she's in this deck rather than be paying her for her full cost. So Command Team is really good. It may not be good in all situations, but if you have these ones where you really want to get the max use out of your allies before they block, or because they're about to die in another way, Command Team allows you to do that. So I personally really loved Command Team. It's 3 readies on across your allies for 2. I think that's absolutely worth it, and I had a really, really good time with the comboing of these new leadership cards with it. Okay, so as I mentioned, next one up is Sneak Attack, which I already kind of touched on, but I'll do a full overview now. So it is a 1-cost event that says, action, choose an ally in your hand that shares a trait with your identity. Put that ally into play. So you're basically playing it for not for free, for the 1 cost you played for Sneak Attack, essentially. If that ally is still in play at the end of the phase, though, you have to discard it. So again, this is allowing for a new playstyle with expensive allies, where the idea is they're not going to stay in play to block for you. So everything we know about allies is that a large part of what makes them so beneficial is that they can chump block for you, or they can get a couple blocks in, and it makes you feel safer. It defends for you. It allows you to stay in hero form. That's a lot of how we've been playing allies. Sneak Attack comes along and says, let's play allies completely differently, which is why I love Sneak Attack so much in this pack, because it is taking the way we viewed allies and an entire playstyle and saying you can now play it differently. So we just saw Captain America as an ally, which is a super expensive ally. This would, potentially work on Captain America. That may not be as beneficial because a lot of Captain America, I believe, is with the toughness and blocking. Now you're not going to be able to do that. But it allows you to go back and look at really expensive allies and say, hey, is there a build I can do here with sneak attack where the idea is not to keep these allies in play, it's to use them really, really quickly and then have them go away and maybe, you know, get them back with, what's that card called? Make the Call, or I think that's what it's called, you know, from your discard pile. There's a bunch of combos, things you can do that sneak attack allows, and specifically in this deck, it worked phenomenally with Black Panther and with Captain Marvel. It works well with any allies that have a trigger when they come into play. And because we now have Command Team, you can get multiple uses out of these allies before they discard at the end of the turn. So it doesn't actually feel as bad to only, you know, you have used them the one turn and not have had the blocker. So I actually love sneak attack, not just with the way it worked in these initial cards, but just for the game in general. As soon as a card comes along like this, that basically spins an archetype on its head or a card tip on its head like this does, I think it's great for the game because it allows new deck building possibilities. It allows us to look at old cards differently, which is something I am always a big fan of. Great card, absolutely love it. And in addition to that, we have another one that ties into that playstyle, which is Save the Day. So this is another one-cost event. The hero action is discard an ally you control, remove threat from a scheme equal to that ally's printed cost. So again, the reason this is in this pack and works well with sneak attack is because if the ally is going to die at the end of the turn anyways, you can now get extra use out of it for a single cost to basically use these really expensive allies like Captain Marvel, which is a 5 cost, to remove 5 threat from a scheme for 1, and that ally was going to die anyways because you brought it into play with sneak attack. Or it's an ally that's done a whole bunch for you already, and it's you don't need the blocker, and you're getting some extra use out of it to remove some threat. It's a way for leadership to remove threat. It's a way for leadership's new archetype here to get extra use out of these allies. It's great that we got it. It just allows this archetype to function a little bit better right off the get-go. And if you're building a deck around this new archetype of like temporary allies essentially, or like putting Nick Fury and things like that in, this is a card you're probably just going to include as a piece because right now we have these very limited pieces of that puzzle to do. Save the Day makes sense as your way to remove threat. And lastly, we have one more to fit into this new archetype, which is Go Down Swinging. It's a 0-cost event, super easy to play. Hero action, discard an ally you control, so not from your hand, to deal damage to an enemy equals that ally's printed cost. Again, phenomenal because it allows you to take that Captain Marvel and turn that into 5 damage, to take, Black Panther, turn that into 4 damage if they were going to die anyways because you brought them into play with a sneak attack. So it really just, all these cards I personally love because I find this a way more interesting way to play allies. I think I'm less excited as some people are about leadership, specifically because I don't necessarily love the idea of, it's funny, I love allies as like the thematics of them, as seeing which new allies we're going to get, and I love playing allies. I hate the idea that these allies, their most useful thing is just a chump blocker. That I bring these allies into play, these really famous characters I love and everything, and really they're just here to take a hit for me. I find that way less interesting than utilizing them for attacks and abilities and getting that kind of mileage out of them. That's what draws me to allies more, and unfortunately leadership doesn't focus on that quite as much. It can. You can build, don't get me wrong, you can build archetypes where it focuses more on their base stats and things like that, but so much of what makes the strongest leadership decks work is having all these blockers. I love this archetype because it says your allies are now being used for their abilities and for their base stats first and foremost, and then a lot of the time going away after that because you're using cards that discard them, or they're discarded because you use sneak attack to bring them into play. I find this archetype so exciting that I cannot wait to take these cards and start building some different decks around them and just finding some really neat combos. And it allows leadership to have ways to thwart and deal damage as well from its base cards. So huge fan of all these new leadership cards we got. I really can't stress that enough. I still find it a little bit odd that we got it in the War Machine pack, but I'm not complaining because it just adds to some of the reasons why I love this pack so much. So let's move on to the one new basic card, which is a team-up card called 2 Against the World. This is a 3-cost event, team up with Iron Man and War Machine. So all the way back to the original Marvel Champions core box, we're getting a team-up card for one of those heroes, which is kind of neat. The hero action here is search your deck for a tech upgrade, put it into play, shuffle your deck, ready Iron Man and War Machine. So this is phenomenal. The reason it is because I'm gonna relate this back all the way to Iron Man from the original box. You're getting a tech upgrade from your deck and you're not adding it to your hand, you're putting it directly into play, which means that for Iron Man specifically, who starts with a low hand size and is so reliant on building up his kit, you're going to go get an exact piece of his kit, of his tech upgrades. You're obviously going to try to get the most expensive one that you haven't yet played because you're paying 3 for this anyways. You're putting it directly into play. You're tutoring that out of your deck, and you're readying Iron Man in that case to be able to do more on your turn. So as long as you can hit an expensive tech upgrade that you did not have in your hand, that you specifically want to go grab, that you're waiting to come up, this card is phenomenal. The only time it's going to fall short is if you already have played your expensive tech upgrades. Later in the game when you've played them, this card ends up just being, it's just a resource at that point. So it's not going to be as valuable as the game moves on, but early on, especially if it's like in the early turns, this is basically getting this in your hand is just, hey, that tech upgrade that you didn't get in your opening hand or weren't getting early, go ahead and grab it now. It's another opportunity to grab any of those cards from your deck. So I really love it. I think it's great. Again, it's more beneficial specifically if you're playing with someone who's also playing Iron Man. Otherwise, you have to hope that you get the ally in play. That is obviously limiting, but as long as you meet one of those requirements, I think it's phenomenal value. Next up, we have equipment malfunction. This is the obligation. So obviously give this to the James Rhodes player. You may flip to Alter Ego, choose either exhaust James Rhodes and remove this from the game, or remove all ammo counters from your identity, and if 2 or fewer were removed this way, this card gains Surge, but you discard this obligation. Obviously, all obligations have something to do with whatever the mechanic is of that hero, hindering it. Removing all your ammo counters sucks. They noticed that the way to get around this would be if you exhausted him completely of all ammo counters but stayed in hero form, and you revealed this, you could have been like, oh yeah, sure, I'll remove all ammo counters, which would have ended up being 0. So they gave you put a way around that so you don't get off the hook too easily. Otherwise, it'll gain Surge when you discard this, and you have to take another card off the top. So overall, not the worst one, but again, if you when it's really bad is if you've left a bunch of ammo counters on War Machine because you specifically want to save a big attack for next turn or whatever the case may be, or build things up with Munitions Bunker, whatever. And so you've left a bunch of counters on him, and then you draw this because no matter what, you're losing them. You either flip to Alter Ego and that's going to make you lose them, or you discard them all and that's going to make you lose them. So in general, you may find that you're going to Alter Ego less. No, I don't even know when you necessarily do the bottom one, because a War Machine with no ammo counters, like I just realizing now, the couple times I got it out, I always did the top one, but I wasn't even thinking that like to remove all your ammo counters makes War Machine useless. So on your next turn, you're going to flip to Alter Ego form anyways. I almost don't know when you do the bottom unless you really have something in your hand that you specifically need to be in hero form for and doesn't require ammo counters. So this almost seems like more of a blatant choice that to just always flip to Alter Ego with it. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments if you've played, if you found that you're using the bottom more often in certain situations. I personally never have, and I'm now thinking about it and wondering when I would. But overall, not a horrible obligation. It's just if it comes up at the wrong time, it's going to feel horrible. All right, the Nemesis is Living Laser. This is a 4 health minion, 1 scheme, 2 attack, quick strike, and Living Laser's attacks gain piercing. So nothing overly fancy here. The piercing, obviously, and the quick strike are they're not awful, but they're not good either. But generally, it's very, it's not too hard to deal 4 damage to Living Laser, especially with War Machine's arsenal. I never had an issue dealing with Living Laser that never really stayed in play very long whatsoever. So I would say that I would have preferred us to get a Nemesis minion that, really impacted War Machine's ammo counters in some way, or remove them in some way just to make it feel more detrimental. Living Laser as it stands is just pretty easy for me to deal with, and I've never really had much of an issue. We have the side scheme, which is Deadly Light Show. Hinder 1 extra counter per player. When defeated, deal 1 damage to each identity. So really this is only bad if you really bad if it's removing tough status cards, which War Machine can have very often, or that one damage is really going to affect your health in a negative way, or or you're leaving yourself one health. Like it's honestly not that bad to deal with. Yeah, you have to remove the threat from here first, and it could have a decent amount of threat on it, so it's a little bit more than we're used to. That might take longer to deal with, but in general, the actual effect of when it's defeated isn't really making you say like, like when am I going to remove this? Like I have to be calculated here. Like it depending on the situation, sure, but I never really found it to be that big of a deal. Next up, we have 3 copies of Laser Strike. So this is a treachery. When revealed, discard an upgrade you control. If you can't, this card gains Surge. The boost is if this resolves during an undefended attack, discard an upgrade you control. This one sucks. There's 3 copies. You're going to see them a lot if you've drawn Shadows of the Past, and your upgrades are your bread and butter for War Machine. So having to discard them, there's no 2 ways about it. It's going to suck. You're going to lose a combo piece or a part of your kit, something you're relying on. If you start drawing multiple ones and drawing them as boosts on undefended attacks, you're going to feel it as well. So really, really bad. If they're in the deck, cross your fingers they don't come up right before you absolutely are going to be using your upgrades, and hopefully you have enough of them in play that you can prioritize which ones are more important to you. All right, that's it for War Machine's regular cards. Let's talk about the new cards we got that you can add into other player decks, or this one if you'd want. The first one is the Aggression card called As One. This has a new keyword, which is Alliance. So Alliance is a brand new keyword, and what that is that when you play this card, anybody else who's controlling a hero in the games, or even if you're playing two-handed solo, the other hands of the other heroes can help pay for Alliance cards. So it's a way to, if someone has a hand of cards that they're not going to have to use everything in their hand, or you really can do a lot with your Alliance card, they can help you pay for it so that you can get more mileage out of your hand. So it's really cool. I hope we see more Alliance cards added in. I like adding in more ways for players to help each other, like the cooperative nature of the game to really tie into that. I think Alliance is a great keyword. 2-cost event, has Alliance. The hero action is an attack, exhaust an Avenger character and a Guardian character, so you have to really have built your deck specifically for this, to deal X damage to an enemy, where X is the combined attack of those characters. This attack gains overkill. So really it's damage you would have been potentially doing anyways. The difference is you're not taking the consequential damage, which is really the big difference maker here, and it's gaining overkill. So very specific. You have to build your deck a very certain way, but if the deck is built around that and also built around the longevity of your allies and getting as much as you possibly can out of them, not taking the consequential damage, and especially the overkill if there's a lot of minions will be helpful. So not an amazing card, but I think it's good, and it'll find its way into specific decks that take out very specific scenarios. Next up, we have Vigilante Training, 1-cost support, max of only 2 per deck, so you're only getting 2 of these. It has 2 uses, so it comes with 2 training counters. Alter Ego action, exhaust this card and remove a training counter. Choose a Justice event in your discard pile and shuffle it into your deck. So it is a pretty interesting card. It is giving you 2 guaranteed, I shouldn't say guaranteed, I mean it could get removed, but generally guaranteed times to get 2 Justice cards, 2 Justice events back into your deck. Because they're going into your deck, it really depends how big your deck is at the time, when you're going to see them, how likely you think it is that you're going to get them in your hand. If you have a smaller deck, you're really getting a card that you want next turn, essentially. So it's really going to depend. I don't think it's that great, but I don't think it's bad either. I would have loved if it was added to your hand. I think there would have been way more possibilities for it. Maybe they would have had to increase the cost to 2 instead of 1, obviously, but I think that would have been more interesting for me to time it to get something specifically to my hand from my discard pile that I can play then, rather than putting it into my deck and not knowing when it's coming up. But regardless, I think it'll still see some use, but it's nothing that I was overly excited about. And then we have the Protection card, which is Stand Together. This also has Alliance. It's a 4-cost event, very expensive. Hero Interrupt, when a friendly character would take any amount of damage from an attack, exhaust an Avenger character and a Guardian character, prevent all that damage, but also deal that much damage to the attacking enemy. So there's a reason this is expensive. It's because if you time this properly, and if you wait for a moment where you are going to take an absolutely huge attack from the villain or from a minion, I guess, of some massive amount, you are going to basically use your entire hand. If it's a 4-cost event that you're playing on the villain's turn, right? So, I mean, you're essentially going to spend 5 cards from your hand total, which is essentially your entire hand, negating your entire next turn, or like at least not like based, if you have allies in play and if you have things you can do with your hero, sure, but with your hand you're not going to be doing anything, to basically negate an entire attack but deal that all back. So to me this only really makes sense if you have a huge attack coming your way, because otherwise you have to look at it as I'm spending 5 cards to do how much damage, right? If you're only doing 4 damage, if in a pinch, if you absolutely could not take 4 damage, sure, but is it really worth 5 cards to not take 5 damage and do 4 not take 4 damage and do 4 damage? I don't know. To me, you have to really be taking a huge attack for that to matter. I think it's going to be very situational. You're going to put that into a deck where the villain specifically is always doing huge attacks, or very often on say expert mode doing huge attacks as your counter to that. So it's more of a sideboard situational card than it is something you're just constantly putting into protection decks. And then lastly, we have Sidearm, which is the new basic card. It's a 1-cost upgrade. It is a weapon for those weapon heroes out there. Attached to an ally, though, max 1 per ally. Attached ally gets +1 attack, and its attacks gain range. Not a lot to say there. It has to be on an ally. You're giving them +1 attack. They are gaining range, so if you're against a villain that specifically the retaliate is taking out your allies or making it so that you don't want to attack, this is freeing you up to do so now and boosting the attack. So pretty good, but again, it's going to also be situational. And then nothing to talk about this last one. It's just another copy of 2 Against the World. So that is War Machine. So let's talk about War Machine for a little bit here, because there's a lot to unpack with this hero pack. This is a hero that I absolutely adore. I love the playstyle. I love how much you can, I love the idea of building up his kit. I loved it in Iron Man. It's one of the reasons Iron Man was one of my top 5 heroes when I did that video. This one also has a kit that you're building up. You feel overpowered in a different way than Iron Man does when you build up the kit, but you still do feel overpowered. And the overpoweredness comes from these massive turns you're going to have by taking the ammo that's on Munitions Bunker at the appropriate times, and having the support cards in play and the tech cards in play to utilize these ammo counters to their full extent. I had so many turns where I was doing such huge amounts of damage. If I had to go back and make sure I didn't do anything wrong, that I wasn't doing like anything that was illegal based on my turn. And I had games where I absolutely destroyed villains. Like I had a game against Ultron where I beat him on the second level of his scheme. He never made it to the final one, and I never went below. I guess I got to 4 health one time, but it was like I was never in danger. I was able to go to Alter Ego and heal very easily. I never felt in danger. I always dealt with the drones when they were in play, and I absolutely slaughtered Ultron without ever feeling like the game was out of my control. So again, I didn't draw Shadows of the Past that game. There's things that could have happened, but he just feels so strong. And it's so much fun to play War Machine is the biggest thing. And what I find interesting is that leadership is not the aspect I gravitate towards the most by any means. But I love the leadership cards in here because of the new archetype it allows. So it's also a pack that I think is almost essential if you're wanting a new way to play leadership, or you don't like the current ways that you can play leadership, but this is something that you would love to play leadership in this style. This becomes an essential pack to buy because it now frees up a whole new aspect for you to try out that maybe before wasn't interesting to you. So again, I'd have to think about it a little bit more because I really, really love Quicksilver. But this may be my favorite pack of the year for new releases. If it's not my favorite one, it's definitely in the top 2 or 3. I absolutely love it. I'm having so much fun playing War Machine. Maybe that's just me, and that's the great thing about Marvel Champions is that everyone's playstyle is different, so everyone's going to love different heroes. Like I also love Drax as well, and there could be people that hate Drax or hate War Machine based on the fact that they like to play heroes that are a little bit more wild, like Star-Lord or Scarlet Witch. But for me personally, I absolutely love War Machine. So let me know in the comments what you think about War Machine if you've got the pack for yourself and have been playing them out. I'm super curious to hear who aligns with me with how much they love them, and who's like, what are you talking about? I hate War Machine. I'm just very curious to discuss in the comments. Let me know what your favorite cards are. Let me know what some interesting moments you've had with War Machine. Otherwise, I don't know when I'm going to have the hood to review that, but I imagine it will be soon. Everything seems to be arriving at the same time. So at some point, I will be bringing you a hood video. And there is some pretty exciting Marvel Champions content that I'm thinking about doing and planning for the next month or 2. So keep an eye out on our YouTube channel for that, as well as some of the community groups like the Facebook group or Reddit. I have an idea that we might be tackling pretty soon with Marvel Champions that I think is gonna be pretty fun. So thank you again for watching. Again, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel so you get notifications and always know when we drop new Marvel Champions content or new content in general. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.